The link to the story will be in the description. A Son's Devilish Made by Pain's 17ification.
Chapter 4. Guardians of the Crescent Moon, Part 1. Naruto and Grafia were first at the gates the following morning, both prepared for the mission ahead. The Uzumaki was dressed in his new clothes with a single addition to the attire. A strap that held a total of 5 sealing scrolls on it. Each scroll held some manner of sealing arrays that would hopefully be unused. But the young man had been of the impression of, better safe than sorry. Grafia was in her standard maid uniform, but hidden underneath was her patched-up bodysuit. She had found it resting on the dresser of her personal room, which was connected to her master's, stitched together quite well. She had smiled at the sight of it, knowing that it had been repaired by Naruto and appreciating the work he put into it. It was a heartwarming gesture on his part. The next to arrive were Jonin-sensei Might Guy and his young protege in the flames of youth, Rock Lee. Both were sporting green bodysuits that hugged their bodies well, and both had red-clothed headbands acting as belts for them. However, Guy also had the standard Jonin flak jacket over his suit, while Lee had bandages covering his hands from fingertip to elbow. Naruto had met Lee a couple of times, but the two were acquaintances at best. They only knew one another's names and nothing more, so this was a good opportunity for the Uzumaki to try and make a new friend. "Good morning to you both, Guy-sensei," Lee greeted the blonde with a polite smile. "You both look ready." Giving his fellow genin a thumbs up, Lee exclaimed, "Yosh! I am most ready indeed, Naruto-san. I can't wait to show off the fruits of my training and the strength of my youth." Guy was quick to continue, "That's the spirit, Lee. Don't let your flames dwindle for even a moment. They must burn like an inferno and only become embers at the bitter end." "Yes sir, Guy-sensei," saluted the genin before the two eccentric men began to get emotional. It ended with them both hugging and crying manly tears, leaving Grafia feeling a mix of discomfort and intrigue. Naruto, however, thought that the shared moment between master and student was actually kind of nice. While not to their extreme, Naruto wished to have that kind of bond with both his teacher Enko and any potential students he might have in the future. Moving over to his maid, seeing as both taijutsu enthusiasts didn't look like they'd be stopping soon, Naruto stood next to her and waited for the others to arrive. "Naruto-sama," Grafia began, getting his attention, "I must thank you for patching up my suit. You didn't need to do that, though." He smiled back at her. "I know, but I wanted to," was his simple reply, making her return his smile. The compassion she saw in his blue orbs touched her, and it further supported her belief in his potential. In a world where the strong thrived and the weak suffered, such a notion of compassion would be quite alien to many. But it was because it was so unexpected that it would be all the more worthwhile and inspiring, and Grafia was pleased that she'd be able to witness her Naruto-sama's compassion change the world for the better. It was around half an hour for the rest of the Leaf Ninja to arrive. Naruto and Tenten both exchanged polite smiles and waves in greeting, while Yakumo gave Lee a curious glance. As for the last member, Neji Hyuga, he seemed to be adamantly refusing to give Team Enko nothing more than the barest amount of attention. "All right," Enko began, "the client is known as Michiru Tasuki, the Prince of the Crescent Moon Kingdom. With him is his son Hikaru and the prince's many servants and envoy." Guy then took over. "It is our mission to make sure that both Prince Michiru and his son make it back to their kingdom safely. While we will also try our best to defend the others of this envoy, those two are our top priority. Is that clear?" When he got nods from all 5 genin, he gave a pleased smile. "Excellent. While we wait, why don't we get acquainted with our temporary, yet no less youthful, teammates?" "Actually," Tenten cut in, "Whiskers and I know each other a bit. He came to my family's shop to buy his current uniform." "Naruto-san and I are acquainted as well, Guy-sensei," Lee added. "True as that may be, you only know each other on a small level. To be successful, it's best to know who you're working with beyond that of passing glances, first meetings, and initial greetings." Enko decided to cut to the chase. "We'll keep it short and sweet. Give your name and something about yourself. We'll start with the green mini-me." Lee saluted and exclaimed, "Yosh! My name is Rock Lee, and while I cannot use ninjutsu or genjutsu, I will still serve my home youthfully with my taijutsu." Naruto and Yakumo looked intrigued at his chakra-related disability, but they didn't comment on it. Tenten went next. The name's Tenten Higurashi. I'm a weapons specialist and have 2 goals. To become a great kunoichi like Lady Tsunade of the Sannin and to get some experience with the many rare weapons of the elemental nations. You mean like the 7 swords of the mist? Naruto queried. Exactly. Each of those swords are unique in their own way, but they're only a piece of the pie. Both of Anko's genin nodded at her goal, giving her encouraging smiles before turning to Neji. He had his arms crossed as he leaned back against a tree near the gates. Neji Hyuga of the branch house. I specialize in my clan's taijutsu, and that's all you need to concern yourself with. Naruto frowned at his rude introduction, but he didn't comment on it. Graphia also frowned, but it was faint since the arrogance the boy showed reminded her somewhat of the old faction of the Devils. I'll go next then. I'm Yakumo Kurama, heiress of the Kurama clan. I specialize in genjutsu, but I don't overly rely on it. She smirked at them, leaning on one leg with a hand on her hip. I'm also starting to train in lightning style, so don't be surprised to see something shocking. Naruto snorted a little while Anko and Tenten smirked in amusement. Neji didn't react to the pun while Guy gave a laugh. Lee grinned at Yakumo and gave her a thumbs up. I cannot wait to be shocked by your skills, Yakumo-chan. The heiress blinked at the added suffix, but she smiled all the same and nodded in thanks. All right Gaki, your turn, Anko said, turning to her blonde student. Right, nodded Naruto. My name's Naruto Uzumaki, and as of recently, I'm the heir to the Uzumaki clan. While I used to live in the red light district, Neji perked up a little, but was unnoticed. I now live in my parents' old compound and plan to make my lost clan be recognized again. With me is Graphia Lucifuge of the Lucifuge clan. The she-devil gave a nod of her head in greeting, hands clasped in front of her as her position's etiquette demanded. A pleasure to meet you all. As Naruto-sama said, I am Graphia, and I am Naruto-sama's personal retainer. Neji frowned at this, feeling her introduction hit a bit too close to home for his liking. His retainer? So, are you his slave? Graphia rose a brow at his tone while Naruto looked disgusted. No way, he vehemently denied. She's not my slave and I didn't force her into becoming my retainer. She chose to do so, and she's the one who keeps saying I'm her master no matter how many times I've said she doesn't owe me anything. Graphia was touched at Naruto coming to her defense so quickly, but she decided that a clarification was needed. Naruto-sama found me when I was weak and close to death. It was mainly thanks to his personal hand in my recovery that I am standing here before you. As much as he denies it, I owe him much and have dedicated myself to him. Everything that I have, everything that I am, belongs to Naruto-sama. Naruto blushed at this, being reminded of the night she had declared such to him while the rest of Team Anko simply looked amused at the byplay. They were used to seeing Graphia's dedication to Naruto and his embarrassment at being placed on such a pedestal by someone of her power. Meanwhile, Team Guy had mixed reactions. Guy and Lee were once more weeping manly tears, though this time they were for Naruto's selflessness and Graphia's determined standing about serving him. Tenten knew that Graphia was already Naruto's retainer, but she only knew a little about the reason why. Seeing her dedication to the blonde Uzumaki was surprisingly inspiring to the young kunoichi. As for Neji, he kept his frown. Being a branch house Hyuga, he knew his life was to be one of servitude, a life he had no choice in living. Seeing this woman, one who had a stature befitting a person of power and experience, willingly choose to live the life of a servant got under his skin. What bothered him more though was how Naruto, a self-admitted person of lower class, was suddenly living the life of an heir with a new home, a new servant, and, most importantly, a life better than what he was meant to live. Somehow, someway, Naruto Uzumaki had broken free of his fate and now had a newer, more fulfilling, destiny ahead of him. It made the Hyuga's jealousy simmer beneath his normally stoic nature. However, he quickly, though with effort, reeled back that jealousy when their client finally showed up. Surrounded by guards and servants was a man who looked fairly young, but was already showing some girth due to his lavish lifestyle. From his legs, to his stomach, and his face there was an extra mass of skin that was proof of his weight. Next to him was a young boy who wore a pair of glasses. Unlike the obvious prince, the boy was of a healthy weight, though he had a look of annoyed boredom on his face. Having seen the look before, both Naruto and Neji already felt a slight dislike for the kid. He had the expression of a child who could want for nothing, and yet didn't look satisfied. For the two orphaned teens who grew up with little, the boy's expression came off as insulting. Graphia took note of her master's slight frown and patted his shoulder to assure him. When he gave a guilty expression in response, she merely smiled to ease his worry. She wasn't mad at him or disappointed, for she could see where he was coming from. Coming from a house that lived to serve, she saw all types of masters. While some were kind, like her own, others were arrogant, greedy, and cruel. From what she could see, both the prince and his obvious son were leaning towards the arrogant side of the three, with a helping of greedy for the prince. Prince Michiru greeted Guy with a crisp salute that was mirrored by his more exuberant student. "We are ready to depart at your leisure." The prince smiled at his ninja guards, pleased to have so many looking after him, even if most of them were still young teens. "I appreciate it. The rest of my envoy is waiting outside of these village walls, so we'll go ahead and meet up with them before heading for the ports." Enko took this moment to speak. "Prince Michiru, my fellow Jonin and his team will watch over you and your son while my team and I will shift around the envoy and keep them protected. Team Guy is the more experienced group, so they should have no trouble keeping you both well protected." Michiru nodded in acceptance. "That sounds just fine to me. You're the ninja here, so you would know protection better than myself." He then spotted Graphia, and more specifically her style of clothing. "Is she accompanying us? I wasn't expecting one of you to have your own servants." Hikaru looked up from his handheld gaming system at his father's question, taking notice of the silver-haired maid and how close she stood to the blonde teen. "Is she not one of ours, father?" he asked, earning a faint frown from Naruto. Graphia answered the young boy, "No, young master." Team Enko all blinked at the professional tone she had. "I am not a servant of the Tsuki royal family. I serve the Uzumaki clan as retainer of its sole heir, Naruto-sama." She gestured to said heir, making him wave awkwardly to Prince Michiru. "I have chosen to accompany him so that I may offer him and his comrades some assistance on his mission." "Ah, I see. Well then, I welcome you as one of my protectors," Michiru declared with a wide smile. "I appreciate the invitation, Your Highness," replied the maid with a respectful bow before she stepped back, staying just an inch behind Naruto. "Well then, let's get moving," Guy proclaimed before the Leaf Ninja all took their assigned positions and began their escort mission. "I take it you're satisfied with what you saw, Kakashi?" asked Sarutobi to the copy ninja. Both men were in the Hokage office with the Jonin reading his ever-present orange book. "I must admit that her dedication to Naruto is somewhat inspiring. It reminds me of how some of our more patriotic ninja are for the Leaf. But she also has shown some interesting signs," noted Kakashi. "Such as?" Looking up slightly from his reading, the Scarecrow answered, "She's been making attempts to give Naruto a more affectionate level of bonding. From what I gathered, she shares his bed and is trying to get him to move past his mental insecurities around older women, even if she isn't notably aware he has such insecurities." Sarutobi sighed at that. "It's a shame that such a mishap happened to Naruto, and at such a young age too. Even Hana has been affected by the even. Not that I should be surprised. To think that she went from striving to join the hunter division to studying medical ninjutsu." He took a drag from his pipe as he continued. "It was fortunate though that both she and Naruto were able to move on from this, even if it was only slightly." "Why didn't you take him to Inoichi after the incident, Lord Hokage?" Kakashi asked in genuine curiosity. "Because it would have been too risky. The boy was too young for most practices, and a mind delving on Inoichi's end would have been much too dangerous considering the Kyuubi." He regarded his subordinate with a regretful stare. "Believe me, I wish I could have done something more proactive in helping his mental state, but the options were limited. At least he's only nervous around them and not downright phobic of them. Such a fear would have been a serious hamper to his ninja career and his goals." "I can imagine," agreed Kakashi. "At any rate, it seems Graphia-san's presence in his life is definitely a beneficial one." He then couldn't help but give out a perverted giggle. "I'm also pretty anxious to see just how far she'll go to help him get over his insecurities." Naruto sure is lucky. Hiruzen fought a blush at the implications, coughing to both clear out the sudden intake of tobacco and regain his composure. Yes, well, we'll just have to keep an eye on them for the time being. All Kakashi did was let out another giggle in response. It took longer than necessary to get to the nearest port town that would charter a ship to the Crescent Moon Kingdom. With the large group slowing them down, as well as the prince making multiple stops to have a feast, both large and small, with his son and the Leaf Ninja, it took the group almost a week of travel, and they weren't even there yet. Instead, they had stopped at a traveling circus troupe that put on an entertaining display for their honored guests. It was here that we find Naruto seated on a bench outside of the circus tent with Grafia diligently standing beside him. This is taking forever, sighed out the whiskered blonde. I agree, Grafia responded. It is irresponsible on Prince Michiru's part to make so many stops to engorge himself. Naruto sighed again, resting his chin on one of his palms. I guess excess really changes a person. Only if you let it do so, Naruto-sama, assured the she-devil, earning his attention. A weak integrity makes for an easily influenced mind, as seen in the prince. But, here she smiled at him, I doubt I'd have to be concerned about your integrity, Naruto-sama. He rubbed the back of his head bashfully at that. Thanks, Grafia-chan. Patting the spot next to him, he suggested, why don't you take a seat? You don't need to be standing all the time, you know. I appreciate the concern, Naruto-sama, but... Grafia, he cut off, stopping her short. I want you to sit next to me. Please, he requested sincerely. She stared at him for a few seconds before smiling faintly. Very well, Naruto-sama. Thank you for the invitation. She moved next to him and adjusted her uniform so that she was seated next to him comfortably. Looking to him, she saw him grinning brightly at her, which made her smile grow. You're much more different from many of the lords and ladies that my house has served, Naruto-sama? How so? He queried in curiosity. You're incredibly considerate of my condition and feelings, compared to other masters who focus on themselves. Well, why wouldn't I be concerned? He replied, his tone saying that such a notion should be the most obvious thing in the world. She brought a hand up to her lips, demurely covering a laugh that escaped her. While he blushed at the beautiful image and sound, she answered, I suppose that should have been expected of you by this point. Lowering her hand from her lips to his cheek, she softly caressed his face while her smile became warmer. I'm grateful that you were the one who saved me, Naruto-kun, she said, just short of a whisper. While his face burned at her smile, gesture, and voice, he stuttered out, I'm glad I did too. He then coughed into his hand, regaining some composure before smiling back at her with confidence. I can't imagine my life now without you in it. This time she blushed, though it was faint, at his words. But still, she retained her smile before removing her hand and sitting in comfortable silence with the blonde Uzumaki. Both human and devil watched as people went about their lives, showing contentment in their gaze and their smiles. Such a scene was a pleasant change to Naruto. Then, his eye caught a girl, around his age, leading a large saber-toothed cat with gray fur by a leash. Thanks to his training, he was able to catch what the girl was saying to the animal. It'll be okay, Chamu, assured the girl. I know you don't like the performance, but the people paid to watch us. She stopped walking, crouching down so that she was face to muzzle with the cat. With a mischievous wink and smile, she suggested, how about I sneak you an extra helping of food if you put a bit more oomph into your act? Her tone became sing-song as she added, I know how much you like cow tilde. Chamu frowned at her for a moment before his expression lightened and he licked her cheek, making her giggle before hugging him around the neck. That's a good boy. Curiosity got the better of Naruto and he decided to go introduce himself to the girl and her friend. Hello there, he greeted, earning her attention. With a friendly smile, the Uzumaki stuck out his hand and said, I'm Naruto Uzumaki, one of the ninja assigned to help guard the prince. Can I ask your name? The girl before him was just a bit taller than he was. She had brown hair that was tied in a high tail that was braided and tied near the tips. Said tail was long enough to reach her waistline. Her eyes were a light brown color and her skin was beautifully tanned. As for clothes, she wore predominantly pink colors, with a long-sleeved top that stopped above her belly button and had wide sleeves. Matching colored pants that were tied at her shins in with darker pink ties, brown shoes, dark pink wristbands, a small skirt of a more redder shade, and dark pink clothing that focused around her chest, neck, and shoulders. Smiling in return, she happily took his hand and shook it. "Nice to meet you. My name's Tai Li. I'm an acrobat of this circus troupe." She then patted the tiger's head while said animal looked at Naruto warily. "This fuzzy cutie is Chamu. Say hi to the ninja, Chamu." When the cat just gave her a deadpan stare in response, she laughed sheepishly. "Sorry, he's not really a people person." "That's all right," assured Naruto before gesturing to his retainer. "This is Graphia Lucifuge, a close friend of mine." While she was pleased that Naruto viewed her as close, the she-devil couldn't help but once again give her own comment. "I'm also Naruto-sama's personal maid and retainer." She gave a faint smirk, "even if he keeps saying I don't need to be." Naruto huffed and looked away playfully while Tai Li giggled at their byplay. "Nice to meet you, Graphia-san. Hey, if you're supposed to be guarding the prince, why aren't you with him?" Naruto waved her off with a smile. He's got plenty of people watching him. Besides, my sensei said Graphia and I could just hang out outside the tent. We just have to be close enough to help if something happens." "And because you're Mr. Cool Ninja, that isn't a problem for you, is it?" teased the acrobat, though Naruto took it in stride. "You know it." She giggled again at his optimistic attitude, enjoying how bright his aura was. "You're really lucky. I wish I could have been able to become a ninja too, but I'm more than happy here at the circus. Besides, even without a teacher, I was still able to pick up on a few things." She gave a confident wink and added, "I could also bring down jerks with a few taps if I wanted to." "A few taps?" asked Naruto. "What do you mean?" "Pressure points," Graphia answered, earning a bright nod from Tai Li. It seems this young lady has extensive knowledge on the pressure points of the human body, able to pinpoint where to effectively hit and disable anyone she has an issue with. "That's right. See, when I was training my body to be more flexible and agile, I also took the time to study from some of the physicians here in the troupe. Sometimes, they had to numb a patient's body since we don't have much supplies like anesthetics. So, I picked up on a few things and now I know enough to either take some jerk down, or to help someone relax." "That is seriously cool," Naruto praised with a look of amazement. "I'd love to have a spar with you sometime after the show." He then looked unsure as he added, "Well, that is if we don't immediately afterwards and you're okay with it." She smiled and nodded eagerly. "Oh, I'm so up to it. If your team stays after the show, come find me and we'll definitely have that spar, promise." Naruto grinned back and the two teens shook on it before the acrobat waved him farewell and resumed leading Chamu to the tent. "She was nice. I agree, though I'm honestly curious about her potential here," mused Graphia. "What do you mean?" "Well, based on what she said, she has a fair level of physical training, as well as some self-taught ninja exercises under her belt. Not to mention her knowledge on something as complex as the human body's most sensitive points of pressure. While she could become a great acrobat, maybe even a phenomenal one, wouldn't you agree that she could also become an effective kunoichi, Naruto-sama?" He blinked at that before cupping his chin thoughtfully. "You have a good point. But, even if she would have a good shot, this place is most likely her home and these people are probably like family to her. It'd be hard for her to walk away from it all to pursue a different path in life." "Understandable," agreed Graphia. "I was merely putting it out there, Naruto-sama. It shouldn't be much of an issue to merely suggest the idea to her, after all." He smiled at that, nodding in agreement. "I'll be sure to bring it up to her after the show. Maybe Enko-ne will consider teaching her some stuff. I mean, we are short a genin after all." Graphia smiled in return, showing a faint glint in her eye at the prospect of Tai Li becoming a kunoichi. "That you are, Naruto-sama. That you are." Chapter 5. Guardians of the Crescent Moon, Part 2. To Naruto's luck, the prince had decided to buy the entire circus after having come to greatly enjoy their performance. Apparently, Hikaru had shown up one of their performers with his archery, and when he showed interest in Chamu, it was enough for Michiru to buy the entire circus. While disgusted at the impulsive greed, Naruto wouldn't argue how it worked in his favor of trying to help Tai Lee become a kunoichi. Now, he just needed to speak to Enko about possibly adding her into the team. "Yo, sensei." Enko, who was seated atop the royal carriage, looked down at her friend/student. "Sup, brat? Wanted to ask you about something that came up the other day," he answered, grinning at her. "You mind hearing me out?" She rose a brow before shrugging. Sure," she replied before getting off the carriage and easily falling in step with him. "Go on." "There's this girl in the circus troupe, one of the acrobats, who's got some training with chakra control and even pressure points," he began. "She looks like she wants to learn how to be a kunoichi, but she's still a bit unsure about leaving the troupe. I was wondering if you'd like to help me convince her to join our team." "You want me to take on another brat?" she asked incredulously. "I'm already having trouble just teaching you and Yakumo." "I know, and I can't thank you enough for training us the best you can. But come on, sensei, how often will we get an opportunity like this? To help someone who has the potential to become a kunoichi actually become one?" Enko palmed her face and sighed. "You're killing me, kid." "If I may," began Graphia, who had been walking beside Naruto the whole time. "Perhaps I could offer some outside perspective." The Violette looked to the maid and asked, "And that perspective would be?" "From my understanding, the skills the young woman told both Naruto-sama and myself about were quite impressive. To understand the human body and the specific points that could break it down or fortify it is no small feat. Putting that knowledge into combative practice is an even greater feat of potential." "The point," pressed Enko, still a bit annoyed at possibly taking on another student. "I believe that it would be as Naruto-sama said if you did nothing. A wasted opportunity. Plus, imagine it from another angle." The Silverette Devil smirked. "You could be seen as a very promising jonin and instructor for taking in someone with talent, nurturing that talent, and then showcasing it for your peers to see." This made Enko pause and look thoughtful while Naruto grinned at Graphia. The maid gave a soft smile at the proud look he gave her, enjoying how she had succeeded in his eyes. "That's not a bad argument there, chambermaid," mused the jonin. "It almost makes up for suckering me into another student. Here," she gave Naruto a pointed look, and he gave a sheepish one in response. "Ah, fine, I'll see what she's got before making any final decisions. But," she gave them both a hard look, "it must be her choice." "Got it?" "Yep," agreed the blonde Uzumaki with a grin. "Of course," Graphia replied. A couple days' worth of travel later, and the entire group had finally reached the port town they were set to sail from to the Crescent Moon Kingdom. During that time, Enko had gone over some tactical training with her students, having them broaden their minds since they couldn't do any physical training for the time being. To her enjoyment, both of her students had opposite forms of strategizing, which was good. It allowed for multiple ways to look at or tackle a problem at hand. For Yakumo, she liked to take the time to look over the details of the situation before she came up with a plan, showing the patience she had gained from her years of painting. As for Naruto, he was an on-the-fly kind of thinker, something that was a little difficult to do in a theoretical exercise. But, when he gave Enko his quickly made plans in response to a situation, she would try to throw curveballs at him to throw him off. But, he kept giving quick solutions that had high probabilities for success. It was something that she had seen in only a few people in her time as a kunoichi. Other things that the two genin practiced were the first stages of their elemental manipulation. For Yakumo, she was getting the hang of channeling lightning-style chakra through her hands, but she couldn't get the charge right to magnetize the metal she had been given to train with. Still, she had enough of a basic idea for Enko to give her a jutsu scroll to study. In Naruto's case, the training was going well. He had a bag of leaves he had gathered while they were still on shore and he had been able to cut them halfway with his wind-style chakra. With Graphia assisting him, he was slowly getting better and was hoping to have the leaf fully cut by the time they reached the kingdom's shores. Lastly, Naruto had spoken with Tai Lee about becoming a kunoichi. While surprised that she would be given a chance, she was still on the fence about taking the opportunity. The circus was her home, and the troupe was her family. It was all she had known, and it would be hard to leave them behind. Thinking about it, and picturing himself in her shoes, Naruto gave her space and time to think it over. He didn't want to push her into making a rushed decision, even if he really hoped she would say yes. Just from their few talks, Naruto had found a friend in the acrobat, and he wanted to help her get the chance to become something she had hoped to be. Naruto-sama, Grafia spoke up, breaking him from his thoughts as he leaned on the railing of the ship, looking out to the horizon. Enjoying the view? He chuckled sheepishly at the smirk she gave him before standing beside him. Yeah, I never got to see anything like this back home. We're nowhere near the sea, after all. True, but, from what we've both read concerning your mother's clan, it's no surprise that you have such a reaction to the sea. Reaction? What do you mean? He asked, turning to her. With her gaze to the horizon, and the sunset bathing her in its glow, he found his breath lost to him. It was such a perfect image that he wanted to preserve it forever, especially with the faint smile on her lips. Beautiful, was all his mind could think of at the sight. He fought down the blush on his face when she turned to face him, bringing it down to a faint dusting on sheer willpower alone. When you were staring across the sea, you had a relaxed posture, Naruto-sama, as if all of your troubles were left on the shore you sailed away from. I can only imagine that the sunset only helped you relax, since you never miss an opportunity to watch one, she explained, teasing him a bit at the end. He rubbed the back of his head bashfully, giving an embarrassed grin at the truthful quip Grafia made. Can you blame me, though? There's almost nothing that beats watching the changing skylights that the sun makes as it sets. If almost nothing beats it, then what does beat it? Naruto-sama, the she-devil asked, honestly curious. To her interest, he stiffened at the question and looked away from her almost shyly, growing red in the face. It took only a moment for her to see the answer, and it brought a smile to her lips. Oh, I understand. Thank you for sharing, Naruto-kun, she said softly, making sure they were alone before she leaned over and pecked him on the cheek, making his blush deepen. That is, despite his past misfortune with older women scarring him mentally, Naruto bashfully tripped over his words for a bit longer before he coughed and regained his composure. I was happy to, Grafia-chan, he replied, his voice just as soft as hers. You make me feel safer, he added mentally, once again grateful for having the she-devil in his life. The two shared a smile before they turned to watch the sunset once more. Only this time, the silverette moved closer to her beloved master, grasping his hand in her own with the utmost care. Fighting his flight instincts, Naruto did nothing to push her away, which in turn made her heart warm since she knew that his walls were breaking around her. He was letting her in, showing his trust in her and letting her help him recover. And it was in knowing this that Grafia was never happier. All good things must come to an end. For every good thing, there is something equally bad. Murphy's Law. No matter what saying was used, Naruto was not happy at the moment. A massive storm had rolled in, rocking the ship and damaging it enough for it to start sinking. Thankfully, there were trained ninja on board, along with a, literal, devil in disguise. With their help, they were able to keep everyone, both human and animal alike, from being dragged to the cold depths of the sea. However, that wasn't the real reason Naruto was upset. No, what got under his skin was how apathetic Hikaru seemed to be towards the circus animals at first when the ship started sinking. He had been the one to convince Prince Michiru to buy the circus, and because he lost interest in them within a few days, he felt no sense of responsibility or care for them, or the animals that were part of it. This disgusted the Uzumaki, and he tore into the boy for his selfish nature, calling him trash before he went to help anyone he could. He didn't know the effect the words had on the young boy. So, as he was helping the animals, he was surprised to see Hikaru trying to help Tai Li get Chamu out of his cage so that he wouldn't be caught in the rising water. He couldn't help raising a brow at that, but he ignored it in favor of breaking the lock so that the four of them could escape. Once they reached the top deck, they saw that Grafia was maintaining an ice bridge using water from the sea that led to an island nearby. She had a little trouble maintaining the ice's structural integrity since a lot of people and animals were crossing it while the storm raged around them and chipped away at the ice. Hurry, she called to them, prompting all but Naruto to rush across the bridge while being careful not to slip. Grafia. I'll be fine, Naruto-sama. Just go, she urged. He frowned at that and shook his head, No, I'm not leaving you. I'm not losing someone important to me because they pushed their limits too far. She couldn't help but be touched at how he saw her. You don't need to, she tried to argue. But her words died at the fierceness in his azure orbs. I won't leave you. What happens if you're too exhausted to make it to shore? He was forced to steady himself while forming a clone to help steady Graphia, the ship rocking dangerously from the storm. I'm not going to leave you, he stressed once more, his eyes softening and showing absolute care for her safety. You're too important to me, Graphia-chan. His words impacted her deeply, and she couldn't help the smile on her lips as happiness surged within her core. With a nod, she said nothing more and focused on maintaining the bridge, keeping an eye for anyone left on it. Once it was cleared, she let go of her hold on it, letting the storm break it apart and drag the ice into the raging sea. She fell to a knee after dropping it, not having to do something as demanding as that for a while. She was supported by Naruto, who had one of her arms over his shoulders to help her stand. Can you move? He asked, using chakra to keep his feet in place while holding onto her tightly. Yes, but my body is sore, she replied, grateful that he was so stubborn to stay. Hang on, I'm gonna try to give you some of my chakra, he informed, focusing on passing some along to her. Thanks to her training before the Devil Civil War, she had experience with taking in energy from others. While chakra was different from her magic reserves, it still gave her energy to use so that she could form a teleportation circle. She would have done this for the others, but she couldn't make one large enough, needing another powerful devil to help her do so. Brace yourself, she warned before they vanished, just in time for one final wave to drag the ship completely into the depths of the sea. Despite the storm, losing their ship, and being stranded ashore, fortune still smiled on the people. It turns out that the storm had veered the ship to a small island that was close to the Crescent Moon Kingdom. They just needed to find a seaworthy vessel at the nearest port town. Enko didn't particularly care for that, though. What she was worried about was her student and his maid, since they had not crossed that ice bridge with herself or the others. It still surprised her that Miss Chambermaid had the ice-style bloodline, but she put that aside for more important concerns. Hyuga, she barked out, catching him and his teammates by surprise. Put those eyes of yours to some use and find out where the Gaki is, pronto. While he was annoyed at how she made an order sound insulting, he complied since she was his superior in rank. Activating his Byakugan, Neji scanned the area for the high chakra levels that the Uzumaki had, or for the rather odd energy core that his vassal had. Anything? Prompted Enko, growing impatient in her worry. Nothing so far. They might have hold on. He cut himself off and looked down the beach, narrowing his eyes as he pumped some more chakra into them. They're over there. They just appeared with some kind of transportation technique, and Uzumaki-san's maid is low on power. What about young Naruto? Guy asked before Enko could. He's fine. His chakra has lessened some, but he still has plenty to use. From what I can see, he's transferring some of it to Lucifuge-san. Guy and Enko nodded at that, and the senior Jonin offered to keep an eye on Yakuma while Enko went to fetch Naruto and Graphia. She gave him a grateful look before leaving in a body flicker and landing before her student as he sat behind Graphia, palms on her back and chakra glowing on his hands. Graphia herself was seated cross-legged in front of him and silently enjoyed the warmth his chakra gave her as it replenished her own devil power. What happened? Enko questioned, not in her usual playful attitude. Graphia-chan was trying to keep the bridge she made intact while that storm was rocking the ship, the blonde Uzumaki answered, not losing focus on directing his chakra flow. Graphia picked up where he left off. It was more taxing on me than I estimated, and Naruto-sama had to transfer some of his chakra to me so that I could get us both to shore. I'm still rather drained from it all, so Naruto-sama insisted that he give me some more of his chakra so that I could move on my own. I wasn't aware that you possessed a bloodline, chambermaid, Enko noted, crossing her arms with a brow raised. Any other secrets you think I should be aware of? They're not for me to say, Mitarashi-san, replied the she-devil in a professional tone, sensing the tension growing between herself and the Violet Jonin. Before anything serious could happen, Naruto stopped his chakra flow and took a breath before turning to his sensei. Enko-chan, he began, getting her attention, there is something else that we haven't told you yet. But, the old man knows already, and he was the one who helped me give Graphia-chan a place to stay in the Leaf. I promise that I'll tell you what's going on when we have a free moment. But I think we should get back to the others and figure out what to do now that we don't have a ship." The answer made Enko frown, since she thought that there had been no secrets between herself and the lovable idiot that was her friend and student. However, when she looked back, she knew that she hadn't told him all of her secrets either, and it wouldn't be right to demand him to tell his own to her, especially if the Hokage already knew about the situation. Plus, the kid was right about them having more pressing concerns. Fair enough, she relented, easing the tension in the air by giving her signature grin. "Be sure to remember that promise, brat. You're a man of your word, after all." He grinned back and nodded. "Of course, I am," he boasted, and the two shared a small laugh as Naruto and Graphia stood up from the sand. Seeing her master and his friend once again behaving regularly amongst themselves calmed down the concern Graphia had been feeling. She was worried that the tension would damage the relationship between Naruto and Enko, and while she may not like the woman, she still respected her bond with her master. "I wonder how she'll react to my devil heritage," she mused as she followed her Naruto-sama and his teacher, friend. It was agreed that the circus troupe would stay behind on the island while the ninja escorted the prince and his son to the kingdom. With such a large group, it'd be hard on the ninja to keep everyone safe. That sounded good on paper to Naruto, but he was still worried about his newest friend, Ty Lee. So, he left behind a clone to look after her and keep her company. The girl appreciated the thoughtful gesture and took advantage of it by talking one-on-one with the copy. "So, why do you want me to become a kunoichi so badly?" she asked, hoping to get to the heart of the issue and not dance around it. "Honestly, boss thinks you're a great person who has awesome potential to become a kunoichi," the clone answered. "You told boss that you had wanted to be a kunoichi before you joined the circus and found a family with them. He doesn't want to force you away from the life you love, but he also doesn't want to see you miss your chance to give your old dream another shot." He shrugged with a smile and added, "Plus, the fact that boss's team is one gen and short doesn't hurt. If you get accepted, there's already an open spot for you to fill." She looked down and thought at the answer. "How do you think my chances are?" "Boss seems to think that your chances are great. You know about chakra, you have great physical conditioning, and you know something that not many ninja, besides medics and maybe some Hyuga clan members, know about." "And I'd have to stay in the Hidden Leaf if I became a member?" she continued. "Yes, you would until you retired or were relieved of service," answered the clone truthfully. "It's something that we're all informed of the moment we apply for the program." She frowned at that. "How long is average service?" The clone blinked at the question, not having expected it. I don't think boss knows the answer to that. If I had to guess for him, I'd guess a couple of years at least. Maybe 2 to 3, tops." 3 years, murmured the girl, thinking of how big of a negative that was. "It's still hard to decide," she noted, sounding almost frustrated with how she couldn't make up her mind. "The answer is easy, Ty Lee," a woman spoke up, making the girl turn to the speaker. "Mitsuko-senpai?" she asked, surprised at the woman's words. "You know that I've looked out for you ever since you joined our little family," she began, sitting down next to Ty Lee and the cloned Uzumaki. "You're like the little sister I always wanted, and I love having you here with us. But Tai-chan," she reached over and patted her on the shoulder with a smile, "this life isn't what you were made for. You're a wonderful acrobat, and will always be one of us. But becoming a ninja of one of the Great Five? Who could ask for a higher calling?" Ty Lee looked away at her words. "I'm scared to go," she answered softly. "I know," Mitsuko replied, her tone soothing and understanding. "But just because you won't be with us doesn't mean we won't be with you. You've touched us all, Tai-chan, and I think we've done the same for you. Besides, here," the woman winked conspiratorially, "I think we might need to make a few stops around the Land of Fire's more prominent hotspots." The young woman couldn't help but laugh at that, smiling gratefully for the older woman's words and support. Leaning forward, she hugged Mitsuko, who returned the gesture wholeheartedly. "Thank you, Nei-chan." Mitsuko smiled a bit wider at that, rubbing the girl's back comfortingly. "Anytime, Imouto." The whole moment left the clone with a mixed feeling of happiness and slight envy. But he crushed that negative feeling in favor of being happy for his friend. This moment was for her, after all. Back with the others, they had been able to secure a small boat that would take them to the main island where the Crescent Moon Kingdom was placed. To their concern, they needed to arrive inconspicuously since Michiru had been away for too long, and was unaware of the current events of his homeland. Sadly, while he was away, his father, the king, had gone missing with most of his royal guard. This left the throne open for one of his advisors, Shabadaba, to take, with the help of 3 rogue ninja. The king's whereabouts were still unknown, and Michiru and Hikaru were now obvious targets for assassination since they were the only ones who could rightfully take the throne back from Shabadaba. Upon arrival at the island, the 2 ninja teams decided that they needed to come up with a plan to help the prince take back his kingdom. "We need a way to scout out what we're going up against," Enko began before she pulled out a flyer that she had spotted at the port. "It looks like there's supposed to be some big shindig that'll have all kinds of fancy guests. No doubt that the guy who took the throne will be showing off his new wealth to his guests," commented Yakumo with distaste. "Which means that we'll need someone to go in disguise at the party," Neji added before turning his attention to Naruto. "What?" asked the Uzumaki with a raised brow. "I believe you should be the one to go, along with Lucifuge-san," the Hyuga answered. "Us? Why us?" Naruto asked, not seeing it. Graphia picked up on it, though. "Naruto-sama, if you come under the guise of royalty, you would be able to enter the party with relative ease. The fact that I'm a maid who's sworn herself to you will only help the disguise be more believable." Tenten smirked at that, finding Naruto's surprise to the idea humorous. "I say we let them do it." "Yosh, I agree with my teammates," Lee exclaimed, giving a thumbs up to the idea. "That's not a bad idea, Hyuga," praised Enko, smirking at the young man. "Good thinking." "I agree, excellent idea, my student," Guy added, giving his signature pose to the Hyuga prodigy. "I only wanted to make sure this mission went as smoothly as possible," Neji replied, playing off how he secretly enjoyed the praise. As a branch member, he found that praise outside of his clan was more rewarding than seeking their approval. But Naruto tried to say before he was silenced by Graphia gently gripping his shoulder. When she had his attention, she assured him, "We'll be fine, Naruto-sama. Just imagine it as one of your pranks." She felt a little silly at saying that, but the message got through to her master and he slowly agreed to the idea. So, while Naruto and Graphia would disguise themselves as guests, the others would scout the palace and try to take care of the rumored rogue ninja. Well, Team 9 would be doing that since they were the more experienced team. Enko and Yakumo would be searching for any clues on the whereabouts of the rightful ruler of the Crescent Moon Kingdom. If they could find him, and the royal guards that left with him, they would have a better chance at taking the throne back. This left Naruto and Graphia to think of how Naruto would disguise himself and bribe his way into the party. It took but a moment for an idea to hit him, and he grinned at how fortunate it was that he had made friends with an acrobat. One that was part of a circus troupe that was just a boat ride away. The gala was in full swing by the time Naruto had gotten the circus troupe into the kingdom. He would forever be grateful for his clan's prowess with sealing being in his blood, for he had been able to make seals that not only stored the circus equipment, but were also safe enough to store living things in them, such as circus animals, for example, while the human members of the troupe would take the boat ride to the main island. Arriving at the party in style, Naruto and Graphia were able to basically buy their way into the party when the Uzumaki heir offered the troupe as a gift to Shabadaba. One that the greedy lump of skin and lard accepted all too gleefully. Naruto once again made a mental promise to never give in to greed and excessive wealth. Using the transformation technique to increase his age, Naruto showed up in a formal kimono, something he loathed wearing, while looking like what he believed he would look like as a man in his early 20s. His hair was shorter than normal, his baby fat was all gone, and his body was lean. He was now taller than Graphia, changing his height to just under 6 feet, and his blue eyes were as expressive as ever. To finish off the look, he changed his hair color to his mother's so that he would look the part of an Uzumaki heir. Personally, while Graphia liked how her master looked in this form, she felt that his natural blonde hair suited him better. He looked good with red hair, but it reminded her too much of Seer's ex-Gremory, someone she respected more than cherished, unlike her Naruto-sama. Aside from the hair, she didn't mind what her beloved master came up with for his older look. Part of her tempted to hope that it would become real in the coming years. Once inside, Naruto secretly made clones that took on guises of unassuming people that blended into the crowd and scouted the place. He was about to do the same, but music began to play and he found himself bumping into people as they made their way to the large dance floor for a formal dance. He paled at this, never having done anything like this before. He was about to panic, but he was saved by Graphia approaching him from the side and taking his hand, easing him into the correct beginning stance for a traditional waltz. A dance that was both graceful and exotic to the Crescent Moon Kingdom, and one that Graphia had seen her previous master's family take part in many times. "Just follow my lead, Naruto-kun," she whispered, earning a nervous nod from him as the music moved from its introduction to the natural beat of the waltz. The whole time the music played, Graphia led him through the motions of the dance, giving him a reassuring smile with every step, every turn, and every twirl. Slowly, Naruto began to find his own rhythm to match the graceful beat, and he found Graphia relinquishing the lead to him just as slowly. By the time the music hit its crescendo, Naruto was in control and he had a faint smile on his face that matched Graphia's, and as they danced, they found themselves unconsciously drowning out everything else save for the music and their dance partner. With his transformation's new height, Graphia had to look up into his eyes while he looked down into hers. Azure blue got lost in silvery gray, and his heart began to skip a few beats when he saw how peaceful Graphia looked, smiling warmly at him with her eyes glistening in the light of the ballroom. "Graphia-chan, what are you doing to me?" he thought as he felt every wall he had put up crumbling down like they were nothing. He felt her breaking them down and solidifying a place amongst people he deemed precious, and instead of being afraid at how fast it was going, he found himself happy, at peace for the first time in a long time. And in that peaceful feeling, he smiled back just as warmly to her and pulled her just a fraction closer in between their steps. It was so small that almost no one would notice, but she did, and it made her heart race. It wouldn't be much longer now. Soon, he would let her in completely and she would stay by his side. For she was more than just a maid and vassal of this wonderful young man. She was someone who loved him. As the dance was going on downstairs, Team 9 had run into the rogue ninja that Shabadaba was rumored to have hired. They wore blank headbands to show they were affiliated with no village, and the leader was a man with orange hair by the name of Ishidate. Flanking him was a taller man with black hair named Kongo, and a short woman with white hair named Karenbana. "Might guy, I presume," greeted Ishidate with a smirk full of arrogance. "This may actually prove to be a challenge. Kongo, Karenbana, take out the brats. The green beast is mine," he ordered before rushing the taijutsu master of the hidden leaf. "Watch each other's backs," Guy ordered as he blurred out of sight and kicked his opponent into another room before following him. Kongo grinned maliciously at the genin while Karenbana had a smug smirk on her face. "A bunch of brats?" she asked rhetorically. "This'll be a snap." "Formation 3, Neji ordered, being second in command of the team. Tenten took position behind them while Lee stood beside Neji. "Engage." Lee charged first, moving at high speed despite the weights he had strapped onto his shins. He was upon Kongo in a near blink, but the man was able to punish the frontal assault with a brutal punch to the genin's face. "Nice try, brat," he sneered. Meanwhile, Karenbana had disappeared from their view as red rose petals seemed to dance around them all. To the genin, they felt their motions and senses being dulled slightly, and Tenten was the first to notice the cause. "There's something in the air," she noted, reacting too slow to fully dodge a cut that hit her in the upper arm. "And that woman's genjutsu is making it worse." "Not bad," the woman's voice echoed around them, choosing Tenten and Neji as her opponents while Kongo took on Lee alone. "You're right though, girly. It's a colorless and odorless toxin that we've used for years. We're immune to it." The two genin received many cuts as she spoke, barely able to avoid them being too deep. "Are you?" she taunted as the rose petals grew in number. Neji frowned at her taunts and boasting, becoming quickly annoyed with them as his Byakugan broke through her illusion thanks to seeing her chakra core moving about. However, The gaseous toxin was still throwing off his body's natural reaction timing, making it difficult to land a retaliatory hit on the woman. He struck out with a few gentle fist strikes, but they only hit her loose clothing and not her body, making her once again give a taunt he didn't bother to pay attention to. In the corner of his eye, he saw his female teammate brandishing a pair of butterfly swords and try to hit the woman, but she was having less luck than he was. He tried to think of a means to combat the woman's toxin before he saw a couple of windows. Smirking, he called out, "Tenten, break the glass." She looked confused for just a moment before she caught on and smirked as well. With great aim, despite the toxin, she threw multiple kunai that shattered the windows and let in the nighttime air, filtering out the poison slowly while the two genin remained focused on dodging, stalling for time. With Lee, he had combated the toxin by opening the first of the hidden gates, something he was reluctant to do since it wasn't with permission from his teacher. However, the increased power it gave, thanks to giving him 100% usage of his body's natural strength, helped cancel the toxin's effects. As a result, he started to slowly gain the advantage over Kongo during their taijutsu exchange. "He doesn't use any jutsu," mused the bowl-cut genin. It was odd that the man wouldn't use a natural ninja skill against him, but the team chalked it up to arrogance on the man's part. "Very well then," he mused before he removed his leg warmers and stripped off the weights. The weights themselves were multiple bars of iron that were able to be linked together through either slots or chains, resulting in a staff weapon or nunchaku. With his true speed, Lee dashed around and began to form a heavy iron staff that he used to smash Kongo into the air before using the dancing leaf shadow technique to appear above him, slamming the end of his weapon into the man's chest and sending him crashing down onto the ground below. As he landed, Lee felt the strain his body went through catch up to him and make breathing difficult. "That should be it," he said to himself, taking a breath between his words. However, Kongo was able to get up, much to Lee's shock. "You," the man growled out before he roared, "little bastard." With that roar came a surprisingly fast lariat that forced Lee into a flipping motion with its power. Catching the genin's leg as he was careening, Kongo gave a cruel grin before he slammed him down, making Lee bounce back up slightly from the sheer force of it, and then kicked him brutally into the wall, making it gain multiple spiderweb-like cracks in it. "Had enough, you little runt," taunted the man. With a groan, Lee got back up on his feet, standing a bit shakily but still giving the man a determined glare. "Not even close," he declared, pulling out a weapon Tenten had him practice with, a weighted chain. With skillful maneuvering, Lee had the chain gain enough moment to stretch out and wrap around Kongo before he opened the second gate. With his body recovered slightly, he blurred in front of Kongo and kicked him upwards from the chin. He then pulled out two smaller chains and wrapped them around his fists before leaping upwards, once again appearing above the man. Leaf Iron Fist Lotus. 1. The youthful genin roared, punching Kongo relentlessly as the two shot down onto the ground and impacted the floor, cratering it severely and rendering the man in enough pain to leave him unconscious. Lee was breathing heavily after his technique, but he still smiled brightly at his success. "I did it, Guy-sensei." Back with Neji and Tenten, the two had filtered enough of the poison to fight back. This left Karenbana in shock since she didn't think her poison mist would ever fail her, and it made her wide open for a combined barrage of gentle fist strikes and dozens of senbon that left her chakra network restrained and her body paralyzed. Both of them breathed a sigh of relief at the end of their fight, their bodies stinging from the dozens of cuts they had received from the woman. "You all right?" Neji asked. "I'll be fine," she answered, appreciating the show of concern. "Let's go see if Lee needs help." "He's fine," assured the Hyuga. "He finished off his opponent before we did, and he's catching his breath most likely. From what I could see, he used a dangerous technique that hurt him as well." "The Lotus, probably," Tenten deduced, earning a nod. "Let's go help him up before we find Sensei. Something was off about his opponent, something that has me on edge." His teammate frowned at that before the two went to fetch Lee. Back with Naruto and Grafia, they had been swarmed by the guards that were paid off by Shabadaba. Once the fighting upstairs got more intense, it sent the guests into a panic and Naruto quickly dropped his transformation before he and Grafia began to deal with the, in her words, rabble. He found the sophisticated word for trash to be humorous. To his surprise and joy, Ty Lee had joined them and was showcasing just how skilled she was with pressure points by striking guards left and right, rendering them immobile after a few quick jabs before cartwheeling away towards her next target. "She really is quite skilled," Grafia commented, absently waving her hand fan and sending a few guards away with a blast of wind. "You were fortunate to find her, Naruto-sama." "I'll say," he agreed. "Looks like she made a decision, too." He formed a few clones to take on some more guards while he noticed Shabadaba trying to make a run for it. "Oh no, you don't," he yelled out, swinging his arm forward and sending out a golden chakra chain that raced for the man, wrapping around his legs and making him fall with a shout of surprise. With a yank, Naruto pulled the man from the stairs he was running up and had him land in front of him. "Going somewhere, Your Majesty?" he asked, sarcastically calling him by the title. "Please, don't hurt me," he begged pathetically. "I'll give you whatever you want. Money, status, women, anything." Scoffing in disgust, Naruto turned to his new friend and asked, "Do you mind?" With a playful salute, Ty Lee hit one pressure point and knocked out the begging man in an instant. "That was more satisfying than I thought it'd be." "Glad you enjoyed yourself," he joked, making the both of them laugh while Grafia merely smiled in amusement. "Well, I'd say that wraps up things." "Already?" a familiar voice asked in an almost pouty tone, making the three of them turn to see Enko looking upset while Yakumo was fighting her amusement. "You didn't leave any for us?" Sheepishly, Naruto rubbed the back of his head. "Sorry, sensei, you snooze, you lose." "TCH, cheeky brat," groused the woman playfully. "So, did you find the king?" That made the two women frown. "Yeah, we did. Turns out one of those rogue ninja got him with some sort of petrification technique. He was already afoot in the grave when we got the prince and his son to him." Yakumo added, "It was horrible. Parts of his body were stone and he was fighting to stay alive just to give his son one last piece of advice before he died." Shaking her head sadly, she finished, "It was a lesson about greed and wealth that the prince should have been told a long time ago." Naruto and Grafia frowned alongside Enko at that while Ty Lee looked sympathetically sad for the late king. "Well, we should go check on Guy-sensei and the others. Hopefully they took care of the rogues." Turns out Guy didn't even need to put in a real effort to take down Ishidate. The man had grown overconfident and overly reliant on his petrification gauntlet that he neglected any other kind of training. Since Guy was far more experienced in taijutsu than the man, he took down the rogue without any issues. The mission had been a success. Michiru was crowned king and he had decided to really take his father's final lesson to heart, him and Hikaru. The new prince of the Crescent Moon Kingdom also apologized to the others for his behavior, and promised Naruto that he wouldn't become trash ever again. That earned him an apology from the Uzumaki for the insult. The ninja were all rewarded for their efforts, being given gifts as a bonus for helping Michiru take back his homeland. Guy and Lee were given free weighted clothing from the kingdom's seamstress, which they immediately took to wearing to improve their youthful training. Tenten was given a sword that the royal guard used, the metal being made of a steel that slightly outclassed her weapons. She promised to take good care of it. Neji requested a formal letter of gratitude so that he could present it to the head of the Hyuga clan. He didn't really want anything else since he wanted to show his uncle that he was doing more than the main house was. Enko was gifted with high-quality sake that she already planned to share with her friends back home. She was looking forward to a night with her gals. Yakumo requested one of the art pieces that Michiru had, finding it to be an inspiring piece that she would study and incorporate into her own paintings. She found herself a little flustered when Lee showed an interest in her hobby and asked to see her finished work, though she still agreed to show him. Tai Lee, having been accepted by Enko as the final member of Team 11, was given a messenger dove that she would use to write to Mitsuko and the others. Alongside her, Chamu sat obediently, having decided to leave with the caring acrobat turned kunoichi. Enko knew she was going to enjoy the look on the Hokage's face at the new additions to the Hidden Leaf. Grafia was given a more ceremonial fan that the late queen once had in her possession. It was a beautiful piece that she accepted humbly, planning to use it as a decorative piece for her room at the Uzumaki compound. And finally, Naruto was given a scroll from Hikaru as both a gift of thanks and apology. He didn't know what the scroll held, but based on the red spiral on it, he knew that it belonged to his clan. Grateful for being given something that belonged to his people, Naruto gave the king and prince a respectful bow. With everything all squared away, and the mission payment sealed up and kept safe by Anko, the two teams of Leaf Ninja, alongside their newest members, boarded the ship that would take them as close to home as possible. It was a long mission, and they were looking forward to returning. The whole ride back, Graphia stayed beside her beloved master, the two enjoying the other's company as they rowed across the sea. Chapter 6. A Heart-to-Heart. Leaning against the rail on the deck of the ship was Naruto, his mind wandering as he thought over his first high-rank mission. According to Anko and Guy, the mission was slightly higher than a standard C rank, considering the threat that had been involved. So, instead of a C rank mission, it had been bumped up to B rank. He wasn't complaining, instead being happy that he already had a successful B rank mission under his belt as a fresh genin. Plus, he made a new friend who became his second genin teammate through it all. He was perfectly fine with how everything had gone down. No, what was on his mind was his vassal. Specifically, how his feelings towards her had changed so drastically. It was scary how deeply they had connected, but he found that the fear subsided quite easily. In fact, he found himself comfortable with the connection. Dare he say, he was anxious to see if it would deepen further. What honestly scared him was what would happen next. Fear of the unknown, as some would label it. He already saw Graphia as someone precious to him, someone he would put himself out there for. However, she was placing herself ahead of his other precious people, slowly becoming more and more important to him. What was this feeling? What described feelings that went beyond care or fondness? Was this what love is? He didn't know, for he had never known love beyond that of family. In his eyes, everyone he deemed precious was family to him. Sarutobi was his wise and caring grandfather figure. Iruka was the older brother trying to help him become a man. Tucci was like an uncle who would visit frequently, while Yame was the doting older sister who looked out for him. Kat from the Anbu was like a sister as well, but she had become more of a motherly figure over the past couple of years. Even his team had become family. Enko, like Ayame and Kat, was an older sister, except one that loved to tease him while teaching him how to let loose. Yakumo, surprisingly, was like a younger sister he wanted to watch out for, considering the pain they both experienced. As for Tai Li, he didn't know enough about her, but he was willing to bet she'd become another sisterly figure in his life. And lastly, there was Hannah. While they started off rough, understatement, she did apologize and help him study field medicine. They had put aside their differences over time, and she had become another member of his family, becoming yet another sister to the blonde Uzumaki. This meant his current family consisted of a grandfather, an older brother, 3 older sisters, a motherly figure, and a younger sister. But what was Graphia to him? What role did she play in his family? The woman didn't fit into any of the previous categories. She wasn't a sister, mother, aunt, grandmother, or anything like those roles. Instead she was. What is she to me? He asked himself, nearly giving into the impulse to pull his hair in frustration. Why is she so much more than the others? I don't know what any of this means. By the sage, you're annoying, a voice spoke up, making him tense before woodenly looking to his cloth-covered stomach. Kei Kyubi? Who else can speak to you like this? Was the rhetorical reply before Naruto found his surroundings changed. Standing before a massive set of bars, he found himself staring at red eyes hidden by shadows while water was pooled around his ankles. Nice to finally meet my jailer. You don't look much compared to my previous hosts. Previous hosts, the Uzumaki repeated. Who are you talking about? Your mother, for starters. Mom, she held you too? His blue eyes were wide in surprise. Yes, before I was ripped out of her on the night of your birth. The Biju revealed its full form from the shadows, stopping any comments or questions from the blonde with its very presence. Before you waste your breath with pointless questions, I'll save you the trouble. Yes, someone attacked on the night you were born and tried to claim my power for their own. They succeeded for a moment, since my memory has a large blank moment in it of that night. But who attacked my mom? Naruto asked, his tone pleading for answers. I don't know, the fox answered truthfully. They claim to be Madara Uchiha. Naruto's eyes widened in recognition of one of the village founders. But I'd recognize that damnable chakra of his anywhere. And that masked attacker didn't feel anything like that man. But wait, how did they control you? The Sharingan can grow powerful enough to control us Biju. Whoever the person behind that mask was, they had a Sharingan powerful enough to control me at full power. When I was released from their control, I found myself away from the village where they retreated away from your father. My assumption is that he freed me, though. That didn't stop him from taking that freedom away by splitting my power in half and sealing it away into you. He split you in two? Naruto repeated, not sure he heard right. Yes, by means of the Reaper Death Seal which summons the Shinigami in exchange for the caster's soul. Your father sealed away my yin chakra into himself while the yang chakra, also known as ME, into you. Afterwards, he was taken into the Shinigami's stomach for eternal torment. Dad, he whispered sadly before he perked up slightly. What about Mom? She died from the stress of childbirth and me being ripped from her. Most Jinchuriki die just from the removal of a Biju. But you Uzumaki are damn resilient. It took something extra to make that woman kick the bucket. Wait, so, he swallowed hard, feeling immense guilt. Mom died, because of me? Idiot! Roared the Kyuubi, the force making Naruto fall back while he looked fearfully up at the fox. Did you just ignore everything else I said? Whoever attacked your mother and ripped me from her was responsible for her death, not you. Black lips tugged back as the beast growled at him. I despise humans, but a mere handful have gained my grudging respect. Your mother being one of them. And out of that respect, I won't have you blame yourself for her death. Naruto nodded rapidly, still afraid of the great beast's anger. If there was anyone else to blame, it'd be me. After all, a claw to the body isn't exactly good for anyone's health. You killed her? I finished it, yes. She was already on death's doorstep after everything she had gone through. Though, if it makes you feel any better, she died to keep you safe. Because you tried to kill me, the blonde spoke up in realization, frowning at the fox. Yes, the Biju confirmed, not bothering to lie. I had been sealed away twice, used many times by humans who didn't even bother to take my feelings into consideration. Knowing I would be sealed away again pushed me over the edge, which led me to try and destroy what I would be sealed into. Me, Naruto finished softly. I see. No, you don't. You've got a lot to try and sort out, and until you do, you won't truly understand. Resting its head on its forelimbs, the Kyuubi turned its crimson eyes towards his blue ones. Come back when you've dealt with everything I've said. I want you to have a clear head when we speak further. Further? Like I said, clear your head before coming back. Besides, you already had something else on your mind before I brought you here. It smirked at his look of realization. To put an end to that internal debate you were having, you're starting to view that devil as more important than others. Your mother went through the same situation you were going through when she became interested in your father. Crimson eyes rolled in annoyance. She was insufferable whenever she tried to figure out what she was feeling. Awkwardly, the young Uzumaki excused himself and exited his subconscious. When his blue eyes blinked back into focus, he saw that the sun was still in its previous position, if anything, slightly lower. Time moves differently in there, I guess. Differently in where, Naruto-sama? A familiar voice questioned from behind him, making him jump in surprise and turn around to see Grafia looking at him in concern. Are you all right? I've never caught you off guard like that before. I am fine, he answered, giving a shaky smile. I was just lost in thought and didn't notice you coming. She gave a worried frown before her features softened. All right, would you care to discuss what you were thinking about? I'm willing to listen to whatever troubles you. To her slight surprise, his cheeks flushed slightly and he gave a nervous laugh. And no, I'll be all right. I was just thinking over the mission. Yeah, that's it, ha ha ha. She raised a brow at his actions, standing there as his forced laugh slowly died down as his nerves grew. Closing her eyes, she gave a soft sigh before stepping forward. She caught him by surprise when she placed her hands on his shoulders and drew him in for a gentle embrace. One that made his cheeks become inflamed. I wish you wouldn't be so guarded around me, Naruto-kun, she whispered, making his blush die down. I want to help you, but I can't do that if you won't let me. Guilt tore at him, and he slowly raised his arms to wrap them around her, this time catching her by surprise. I do trust you, Grafia-chan, he whispered back. I'm just trying to figure things out. I promise to tell you, but He trembled for a brief instant. I need time. Pulling away with her hands still on his shoulders, she gave her young master a small smile. I understand. Just know that I'll be waiting for you when you're ready, Naruto-sama. He gave a weak smile back, and she was able to see through his eyes just how much he was trying to reassure her. Seeing that was enough for her, and she raised a hand to cup one of his cheeks gently before she stepped back and walked away. Left alone, Naruto dropped his smile for a sad look, sitting down on the deck and leaning back against the railing. I hate doing that to her. I can tell, another familiar voice spoke up, making him turn his head and see Enko sitting on the railing itself, her legs kicking carelessly as she watched the slowly setting sun. Sensei. None of that right now, Gaki, she cut off, turning her head to look down at him with an assuring smile. Let's talk about how you're feeling about Ms. Chambermaid. By the time the moon was highest in the sky, Enko was seated on the deck beside her first student, leaning back against the railing just as he was. In her mouth was the empty skewer of dango she had packed for the mission by means of a storage scroll. She still loved how food could stay fresh in those things, even if it still had a perishable date. Sounds like you're really struggling with this, she finally commented. Can't say I blame you, though, considering what you've gone through. Yeah, he replied softly, hugging his legs and resting his chin on his knees. Any advice? Not yet, but I do have a couple of questions. Maybe your answers will help you figure out what to do on your own. I'll try anything. Good. Now first question. How do you feel whenever you're around her? Alone or with others? Both. He furrowed his brows in thought. When with others, it feels nice to have someone who supports me like she does. I also like how she helps me, and just having her around. And when you're alone? I get anxious, he answered slowly, trying to find the words to say. I know that she cares about me and does whatever she could for my sake, but a small part of me can't help but think it's only because she keeps calling herself my maid, even when I know that's not true. Your past is clouding your thoughts, deduced Enko, using her knowledge of reading people. It was practically a demanded requirement for those who work with Ibiki in the IT department of the village. I don't mean for it to, he weakly defended. It just does. I know, kid, she assured, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. You've had some shit luck growing up, and that luck led to some situations that shaped you into who you are. And who you are is a poor kid who had some bad run-ins with overly sensitive women, which makes you unconsciously nervous around them. He stayed silent, letting her talk, even if everything she said were things he already knew. But then, along comes an injured woman, bleeding and weak, and those feelings of anxiety fly out the window. All you can think about is making sure she'll be okay, even if that meant taking her to your home and risking anyone see you and come up with stories. He winced at that oversight. If anyone had seen him carrying an unconscious woman, no doubt bad rumors would spread like wildfire. So, you take her to your home, patch her up, and ask for nothing in return. Instead of just taking your kindness for granted, she chooses to pledge herself to you, which no doubt was the last thing you expected. He nodded. But, for some odd reason, you accept her offer and she becomes your maid/vassal. He had to hand it to the violet-haired woman. She sure knew how to go over events easily, almost like she was reading a report of them out loud. So, as the days go by, she does her duty as your maid and starts to make improvements to your life, saying that it is all for her master. You don't feel fully comfortable about that, for obvious reasons, and you keep trying to tell her that she isn't some servant to you. She looks to him seriously. The next few things I'm going to throw out my own assumptions and theories. So, correct me if I get any of them wrong. He nodded once. Okay, so, eventually, she says something that gets your attention. It could be that she agrees she isn't a servant, that she genuinely wants to help you, or that she views you as more than just her master. Remembering the night that she first shared a bed with him, he fought a blush and said, the last one. She nodded at that and continued. So, because she said that, you started to view the arrangement between the two of you differently. Instead of seeing her as what she consistently declared she was to public ears, you started to see her as a companion, someone you could come to see as close to you. He nodded again at her words. However, while you were trying to figure out where to place her in terms of bonds, she already decided how she sees you, which made her determined to get you to understand just what she chose. That determination broke through whatever emotional defenses you put up, and it caught you off guard. Yeah, he softly admitted. But, you realize now that you're not as worried about your defenses as you feel you should be. Instead, you find yourself accepting that they were brought down, and it scares you how easily you've done so. You're still trying to figure out how you see her, but she's already made her choice and she's finally gotten through to you on what it is. He gave a weak chuckle at that. You're good, Enko-chan. You see right through me. So, what should I do? I said I had a couple of questions, kid. I only asked you one. So, that leaves me with one more. And that is, if she were to disappear from your life forever, how would you feel? He stilled in surprise at the question. What? You heard me, she urged, standing up and stretching her stiff muscles. Think it over. I'm sure you already know the answer. After all, I already know it. Walking away, she gave him a lazy wave over her shoulder and left him to his thoughts. He frowned as he tried to imagine the recent moments of his life without Grafia in them. Each point in time with her in it, he mentally removed her from the scene, and it hurt. It hurt him to just try and strip her from his life, comparing it to trying to tear his heart out of his chest while he was still alive. Slowly, blue eyes opened wider as their depths brightened in realization. Grafia, he spoke aloud to no one, standing up to try and find her. Yes, Naruto-sama. She spoke up, making him turn to see her standing across from him. She gave him a small smile beneath the moonlight, making her almost glow in the evening. He took a breath and stepped up to her, stopping when he was within arm's reach of her form. I think I'm ready. Her gaze softened, becoming warmer as her smile grew faintly. I'm glad to hear that. I'm sorry for making you wait, but I'm ready to tell you everything. Everything? She repeated curiously. He nodded once. I guess the best place to start would be when I had a bad run-in with Hana of the Inuzuka clan. And I couldn't help but feel intimidated by what was happening, finished the blonde. I've never experienced anything like this before, and my past luck wasn't exactly helpful to what I was trying to figure out. She stood silently, taking in everything that he had said. It all made sense to her, especially with how terrified he became when he saw her body for the first time. Absently, she made a mental note to thank Hana when she met the young woman. After all, if the Inuzuka hadn't taught Naruto how to be a field medic, he wouldn't have been able to patch her up when he first found her. Naruto saved her life, but Hana gave him the means to do so. I think I understand now, she finally spoke up. While I wish I knew of this beforehand, I don't blame you whatsoever for keeping it to yourself. And I apologize for anything I put you through when I unintentionally brought up such thoughts. No, he urged, making her blink in surprise at his outburst. Don't apologize for that. I won't have you blame yourself for something you didn't even know about. It's unfair to you, and you don't deserve that. She slowly smiled at that and nodded. Shall we just move past that then? I'd like that, he agreed with a small smile of his own. Good. She took a step closer to him, gray eyes staring directly into blue. So, I can't help but wonder about just what you decided. Her smile softened at his reddening cheeks. You are aware of how I feel, and of how I will never choose to hurt you. But, her voice lowered to just above a whisper, how do you feel, Naruto? His hands were rested at his sides, twitching closed a couple of times as he made himself keep his gaze on hers. He wouldn't turn away from her, not anymore, not when he realized exactly what he wanted. Shakily, he raised his right hand up to her face, hesitantly resting the palm against her cheek. The contact made her eyes close as she savored the warmth his hand gave against her skin, pleased to feel him stop trembling after a few moments. When her silver orbs opened once more, she saw that he was giving her a genuine smile, one that Anko and Sarutobi had told her he rarely showed outside of people he cherished. He started, pausing to take a breath before his gaze grew determined. I want to try, he finally answered. If you really want this, Grafia-chan, Then I want to try it, too. He saw her smile grow warmer, giving him the courage to continue. You make me feel safer than I've ever felt before. You give me constant support and make me want to better myself. To become a person worthy of having such a wonderful person like you constantly declare herself their maid. He chuckled bashfully, even when I keep telling you that you're not a simple maid to me. Her eyes grew misty at his words, one tear slowly rolling down her left cheek, which prompted him to instinctively rub it away with his thumb. I think that I might be falling for you, Grafia-chan, he finished, his voice soft while the moonlight lit up the blues of his eyes. Another tear fell, and her left hand reached up to grasp his right. Guiding him, she had his hand rub her cheek softly before she moved closer to him. I'm happy to hear you say those words, Naruto-kun, she replied before she leaned down slightly, her lips inches from his own, because I already love you. With that, she closed the distance and softly melded her lips against his own, sharing her first kiss with her beloved master. Her arms moved over his shoulders while his moved around her waist, deepening the kiss they shared while their hearts practically left orbit with how much they had soared. Hers because she finally won his heart, and his because he heard the words he had yearned for all his life. Lifetimes, eons, even infinity could have passed by them, and they didn't care as they just savored the feeling shared between one another. When they finally pulled away, his cheeks were practically atomic while hers were slightly flushed. They said nothing more, simply sharing a tender smile before they moved to the bow of the ship's deck. She stood behind him, being little more than a head taller than he was, and wrapped her arms around him as her chin rested atop his blonde locks. He, in turn, leaned against her and held onto her arms as they stared across the ocean and to the starry horizon. Human and devil, finding love in one another. It was a thought that made them both smile just a bit wider. After the boat docked in the port town closest to the Hidden Leaf, teams 9 and 11 all took off for home at full speed. For Tai Li, this was a good exercise since it forced her to use chakra and get a better feel for it moving through her body. But still, the others kept an eye on her in case she started to tire. Yakumo was also watched because of her past physical weakness thanks to her demon. Despite having to take a few stops to rest, the two teams made it back to the Leaf in a couple of days. During those breaks, Enko decided to get her students trained to act as the 3-member unit they were meant to be. She had them do mock battles with her, letting them work out the kinks of their teamwork on their own so that it settled more naturally. It was no surprise to her that Tai Li and Naruto acted as the frontline combatants while Yakumo was more suited to ranged attacks, thanks to specializing in genjutsu. Tai Li would need to be tested for her affinity when they got back, as well as taught the basics of hand seals and what they meant for jutsu. At this, Enko couldn't help but smirk as she remembered that Iruka owed her a favor, one she intended to cash in. Although, despite the newest member of Team 11 not knowing too much about chakra, Enko had to admit that the girl knew how to take people down. Those jabs of hers were damn efficient, and her knowledge of pressure points would only be an advantage she would have over her opponents. Yakumo had finally gotten a solid grasp on the first exercise for lightning style. When she demonstrated this for her sensei, Enko had rewarded her with a jutsu scroll that detailed a basic lightning jutsu. Electromagnetic murder was a lower-ranked jutsu that could be enhanced with better control, something Yakumo had in spades due to her genjutsu studies. Enko had no doubt she would get a good grasp of the jutsu. For Naruto, he was nearly there with his first exercise, but he was close enough for Enko to give him the scroll for the great breakthrough technique. When she had taken time to ask Asuma for his input, he had suggested giving Naruto that jutsu since it was one of the most basic. Seeing as he was one of the rare few wind users in the village, she heeded his advice without question. Another thing Naruto did was look over his reward for the mission. The Uzumaki scroll he had received were personal notes for an Uzumaki who had once served the Crescent Moon Kingdom before they had passed away from old age. It was their hope that the scroll would be given to a surviving member of the clan, something that had been fulfilled through Naruto. Most of the notes dealt with advanced knowledge of space-time, with a greater emphasis on the spatial aspect of the matter. According to what he could decipher, Naruto saw that it was the owner's hope to break through the laws of reality and attempt to find, in their own words, a new world. At first, he wanted to label his late clan member as overzealous, But Graphia reminded him of her own origins and how the underworld she was born in was connected with an Earth that was vastly different than the one the ninja world resided in. That argument made Naruto take a better look at the notes, silently making plans to study them thoroughly and see if he could find Graphia's world with them. The oddest thing about those notes was how the very center of the ceiling circle had the image of two snakes eating their own tails while they both made an infinity symbol. He was also unaware of it flashing violet when he brushed his fingers against it, his chakra causing a reaction. Well, it seems that this new generation of genin has had similar mishaps with their first C ranks one after another, mused the Hokage after he received the reports from Guy and Anko. Sir? Guy asked curiously. Team 7 had a mission to Wave Country, which wound up being bumped up to A rank because of the appearance of Zabuza Momochi of the Hidden Mist Swordsman. The wielder of the Executioner's Blade? Tenten cried out with starry eyes, her obsession with famous weapons surfacing within her. This made the aged village leader chuckle as he nodded. The very same. Teams 8 and 10 are still on their missions, but with these last two reports, I wouldn't be surprised if they both dealt with similar issues. Well, the ninja involved on this mission were unaffiliated, Guy explained, nodding to the reports. I made sure to note that in my report. Yes, I noticed that. Still, your team did well in helping you take them out, Guy. Team 9 perked up at the praise. As for Team 11, congratulations on your newest member. May I have your name so that I could make your registration legal, young lady? The acrobat bowed politely as she introduced herself. Tai Li, sir, I don't have a surname. That's fine, assured the man as he filled out the information and stamped it, marking it as official. He then reached into one of his desk drawers and withdrew a headband that had a red cloth on it. Seeing her current color scheme and going off that. Welcome to the Hidden Leaf, Tai Li of Team 11. She smiled brightly and took the headband before wrapping around her left thigh. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Well, you're all dismissed. Naruto, I'd like you to stay behind a moment. The blonde nodded and stayed in place while the others left. Tai Li giving her new friend a grateful hug for helping her become a kunoichi before she left the office. Graphia stayed behind as well, standing diligently behind her master. A meeting with my council and the clan heads will be happening tomorrow. I'd like you and Sasuke to attend so that you can get your first experience with your duties as clan heirs. Oh, yeah, I'll be there, agreed the genin. I've been wondering when I'd have my first meeting with you and the council. A thought came to him and he asked, will Graphia-chan be able to attend? I think she could keep me focused on the meeting and help me understand it better. I don't see a problem with it. Now, I want you and Sasuke to meet me here at noon tomorrow and I'll escort you both to the council room. Got it. Thanks for the heads up, old man. Graphia cleared her throat, making Naruto cough awkwardly. I mean, thank you, Hokage-sama. Sarutobi chuckled at that, giving the silverette maid a nod in thanks. I think I must insist on you accompanying Naruto to the meeting after that, Lucifuge-san. Bowing to the man, Graphia replied, I will fulfill my duty, Hokage-sama. Naruto pouted at the subtle teasing, leaving the office with an annoyed grumble that made Sarutobi and Graphia chuckle. She gave the man one last nod before following Naruto out of the office. In a place that was an endless void of iridescent colors, a pair of gray eyes opened and a slender black brow raised. A small hand raised up as the eyes looked at the palm, seeing an Ouroboros symbol light up on the pale skin. Someone found the scroll, an apathetic voice spoke, sounding like it belonged to a young girl. Willing the symbol away, she closed her gray eyes again while her pointed ears twitched in annoyance at the sound of heavy air distortions in the distance. Perhaps this may be beneficial in the future, she mused, wondering if this was a sign. After all, anything that could get rid of that annoyance was a good thing to her.